The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
You can stomp, kick, cry about it all you want, but those Big Ten champion Spartans, that's right, they swept another team this season.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's talk about the champs, which they already wrapped up before this game even started, but that didn't stop them from putting belt to you-know-what. This is a family show, I can't say the actual word, but right off the jump, Michigan State pulverized Michigan. Save for like a little 5-minute stretch in the second half, it was all Spartans, DK. God, what a sensational way for the seniors to go out.
Just a beautiful, beautiful day. Clinching that one earlier kind of lets you just come into this. I don't know if I've ever been more relaxed coming into the game.
Isn't it great?
And like
I know.
more a sense of a surety of what was going to happen. Like none of that first half surprised me in the least bit. I thought that they were going to have some moments where they kind of like made a run on them and it felt like the pressure. And you got to give credit, somewhat to Michigan for kind of battling back. A little self-sabotage with, one guard and three power forward lineups that lasted a little too long. Not sure. It felt, a little tight there for a minute. We all kind of clenched a little bit, but then ultimately, Jace special moments, looks like he's a little hobbled, and he just pulls up, hits a three. He gives you that lefty leaner late as he's falling over. All season kind of in the beginning parts, in the middle, we're like, who's going to rise up? Who's going to rise up? Do they have enough offensive scoring? And now to get these kind of performances from Jace and for Trey to just basically be a big game type player where not only does he want all the smoke, but he's going to back it up in the scoring column as well. Like a legit 1-2 punch with them. Kind of what you're getting from the bigs. And, Akins is going to continue to kind of do his thing, hit some threes for you and defend his ass off. So, you just look up and down and, this is a magical run. I don't think either one of us had any expectations that we're coming into the season and getting this type of it, particularly after the last 4 years. And you just kind of got to sit back and you tip the cap and you say the GOAT still got it and this team is special. And now you got to back it up, right? You just took care of the regular season. It's buttoned up. I don't know how you feel. The Big Ten tournament matters not very much to me. This is all about March, baby, a deep March run. I want you to go to the second weekend and the third weekend. Like they have the horses to be able to do it. Let's see where it goes from here now.
I'll give my quick take on the Big Ten tournament. And this sounds like straight loser talk, but I am a loser, so this fits perfectly. Either just lose that first game, get the legs rested, or just win the whole damn thing. Like, don't waste our time with winning Friday, winning Saturday, then losing Sunday. Like, I know this team's deep. I know that they have, like you said, the horses to do it, and resting the players isn't as important as it was in years past, but I just either bow out immediately, get ready for the big one, or just win yourself another banner. See if I care. DK,
listen, we just want to come out of that tournament with everybody healthy. That is the key to me. That's the thing I'm circling. You took care of the Big Ten regular season 17-3. I know Purdue did that last year. The league was nowhere as good as it was this year. I get that Illinois was better and a little bit more of, like a higher tier team, but the drop off between those two, I think, was significant. And you saw this year, teams are losing to Minnesota, Nebraska. Like this was as deep a league, quite literally, given that we expanded to the teams. But I thought it was as deep and talented as we've seen. Maybe not in the upper tier outside of Michigan State, but I think that second tier had a bunch of really, really good teams. And to have that type of performance after the West Coast trip in the Indiana game, you're thinking like, can they just barely hang on and maybe compete in this game right here and there? Would potentially be for a piece of the title, but no, it doesn't even matter. Just wipe your rival off the face of the planet and finish the season 17-3. You didn't even need this to win the outright Big Ten title. Beautiful.
It's just unbelievable that they didn't just win this title. They didn't just have it wrapped up by the last game, but they won this conference by 3 games. That's unbelievable, DK. Like the next best teams, are Maryland and Michigan sitting at 14-6, and You talked about going into the season. Did we see this kind of year happening for Michigan State? No. And I also didn't see this kind of year happening for the Big Ten, where the winner was going to sit at just 3 losses. I said going into the season, 13-7 could very well win you the conference. It will probably be 14-6. And if Michigan State didn't exist, that is precisely what it would have turned out to be. But look at this. I mean, you also say, like, hey, you may have not seen this going into the season. I'll out myself right now. 3-4 weeks ago, when they did lose to Indiana, however long ago that was, I did not think that Michigan State would be in position to be lifting a banner on senior night. That was a tough stretch, but they did it in the way they've been doing all season. Of course, this game was a microcosm of the entire season. Defense out of hell for the other team, and they jumped on Michigan's throat really early in that game. What was it? 7 turnovers, just 6 points for Michigan early on in this one. They beat the other team on the boards. This one came to the tune of 39-30. And you had Jace Richardson shining. You had just Jackson Kohler being a master on the boards. You had Jaden Akins hitting timely threes, which I like this recent trend here. But man, I got to start the conversation here. And I really wanted to start with a good senior discussion. Like, hey, Akins played really well, and he did. But you got to start with the dog. Trey Holloman, man. And what he did in this game, let's just go through the stats really quick. He had himself 20 points. Okay, not too shabby from Mr. Trey Holloman. He also had 3 rebounds. He had 1 assist, and he had 2 Wolverines put in their place at the very end of that game. I would take bullets plural for Trey Holloman at this point. That man is a dog. God, I love him. How about that for some analysis there?
Yeah, listen, I think, we talked about this the last 4 years, like the loss of identity, right? And completely. I think we saw kind of early on, even though this team didn't play particularly well in the month of November, that like, okay, this team's caught a little differently. Is it going to lead to, actual winning? We have to see that. But like, this team isn't going to be scared of anybody, and they're wired just like a little differently. And certainly. Trey and Fears, the emotional heartbeat of this team. I mean, Trey, the performance that he had in Ann Arbor, and then to back it up tonight with what he did. And, he hit 3 threes, but like some of those mid-rangers when Michigan State's offense was kind of like sluggish.
Yeah.
And he's kind of pulling them out of it where it's like, it's getting to like 11, 13. And then he hits like a kind of like a mid-ranger. And then he does it again. Like Trey is everything that this program has missed the last 4 years. Complete dog, complete gamer in the moment, wears the heart on his sleeve, like, and selfless on top of it, like playing really well, gets asked to move the bench because Jace is starting to be special, and takes that and is more than fine with kind of carrying that mantle for what, because ultimately he's playing starter type minutes, he's finishing games, it doesn't matter, right? Nothing matters in the scoring column, in the minutes column. This team just wants to win the game, and they're willing to rip your heart out and do it. And we've seen it over and over again. And I think that's the most exciting part, where this stretch felt like we've lost something from ourselves. And this year was like a regaining of the identity. And I truly believe that until Tom Izzo hangs it up, like they've regained that. I don't think they're going to lose it again. They understand what that was. That was the distant past. This is the new era, re-ushering it in, invigoration of what this program has always been. And it's just nice to see them kind of reestablish it. So
well said. And I could see why Michigan fans are upset at Trey Holloman. I'd be incredibly jealous too if, the other team had a guard that actually played a semblance of defense, was actually productive on offense, actually stood on business and played with a pulse the last few weeks of a season. I get why Michigan fans are salty at what happened at the end of that game. I'd be incredibly jealous to look at the other side and see like, oh my God, they actually have players that are good and care in a championship stretch of a season. That's beyond comprehension to some of those people over there.
That month of madness, it's here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. If you want to look that far into the future, the futures are there for you. I've got an eye on a couple that I'm thinking about. We got to see how the seedings all shake out. FanDuel makes it easy to back your favorites with spreads, totals, game props, and with tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is easy to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. I don't wait around. I just get the money. It's great. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you can turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. How about a little Montana State, Idaho State? Big Sky tournament. Montana State, slight favorites. FanDuel has them laying 1.5. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
So Alabama wins the biggest game of the year and maybe the best game in years.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Jimmy, absolutely glorious game yesterday. I went on the podcast alone afterwards with just sheer joy. And I didn't think I'd be doing that. I think you and I both said, hey, this game, on the surface doesn't mean that much. And you and I hadn't talked about this, but the two coaches actually sort of downplayed the game weirdly in their pregame press conferences. Like Bruce Pearl, I've never heard a coach say, if we lose. And he actually said that. Not saying this like as some cut on him. I just never heard a coach say that. Like, I think they go out of their way not to say things like that. And Nate Oates didn't say it with those words, but essentially said the same thing. Like, if we lose, it's all right. If we win, great. If we lose, it's all right. But it is the Iron Bowl of basketball. Of course, Alabama wins, and there's a lot to unpack.
Really is. I mean, in terms of what it means, you address that in the cold open. It does mean some things. I mean, in terms of seeding, and seeding is vastly important in both the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament. Really, I think it's a time for reflection because it ended the regular season, and the power of expectations. Because what just happened over the course of that regular season, 31 games, that was one of the best. I mean, on a very short list of the greatest regular seasons in Alabama history. I'm going to measure that by what seed Alabama is in the NCAA tournament. I mean, that's the ultimate barometer of how your regular season was measured, right? I mean, you got a better one. You can't say record, because if Alabama was playing in the MEAC, I think their record would be pretty good right now. The NCAA tournament seeding process is probably the best barometer of your regular season. And the fact of the matter is, I think Alabama's been a 1 seed entering the NCAA tournament ever one time. I think that's right. We'll need Michael Southern to back me up on this. But I think
you got Luke Northern is right.
Luke Northern says it's correct. And Alabama's been a 2 seed. I think this would be something like the 3rd time. It might just be the 2nd time, but I think it's something like the 3rd, no more than the 4th time. That makes it amongst the top 5 regular seasons in Alabama history. And for those disappointed with the outcome of the regular season, that is the power of expectations, because you weren't judging this Alabama team based on Alabama's 100-year history of playing basketball, playing the sport. You were judging it based on what you thought was going to happen, based on a prediction that you made before the season started. High expectations are a great thing, though. It's the sign of a healthy program. You want your program to go into a season thinking, we could win the SEC. We could go undefeated. We could be a 1 seed. You want your program in that position because that means you're probably pretty good and things are going well for anyone to have a reasonable expectation like that. But I would urge people to judge Alabama's season based against the history of Alabama basketball. And if you do so, you'll realize this was easily one of the great regular seasons in Alabama history, which included a road win over the number 1 team. Again, we'll check with Luke Northern. Road teams winning on the road against number 1. I think Alabama's done it before. I think they have. I think they might have beaten a UCLA team that was number 1 in LA. That comes to mind at Pauley Pavilion a long time back.
Long time ago.
Yeah. And it may have happened, but it again, short list. So congratulations to Nate Oates and this great, historically great Alabama basketball team in one of the great regular seasons in school history. And now we get to look forward to what's going to be maybe the most competitive SEC tournament we've ever seen, as well as an NCAA tournament that will be littered with SEC teams, including Alabama. I'm saying a 2 seed. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, I think we're pretty locked into it too. Jimmy Dykes kept saying, hey, I think Alabama could get to a 1. I don't think he can. By the way, Ravitch and Jimmy Dykes, I've about had enough. I mean, I think Auburn and Alabama fans both were like, they both felt very slighted. And in a way, you can say, well, that means they were being, fair both ways. I don't know. I feel like Jimmy Dykes in particular just doesn't do a lot for me as an Alabama fan when he's calling those games. But regardless, you mentioned about expectations. I have a lawyer friend who he says, my job is not to litigate. My job is not to go out there and, try and make settlements. My job is managing expectations. Because when clients come into my office and they have the slightest of slip and falls, or, they got hit in the eye with something from the road or whatever it is, they're like, I want 70 million. I've seen 70 million on the billboards. I've seen 70 million on TV. Why don't I get 70 million? And he usually goes, because this isn't worth 70 million and you're walking fine. Yeah, I'll try and get you something. You just get a little something, but you don't deserve 70 million. And it's the same kind of thing with this, that, Alabama was hyped up. By the way, Alabama hyped themselves up a little bit, but Alabama didn't call all the athlons as they put us on the cover. And it should be noted, Alabama did have the toughest strength of schedule. It's the second year in a row, by the way, we had the toughest strength of schedule after all was said and done. I know Philip Marshall in his latest article for Auburn, which he, unbelievably is slanted, but he said Auburn had this, I think it's, I feel quite certain as Alabama had the strongest strength of schedule after all was said and done, after all the dust settled. And again, I'm not making fun of Auburn. I applaud Bruce Pearl for putting a schedule like that together. I applaud both coaches. And that's where we should be talking. Like everything was elevated yesterday. You and I talked about how we weren't sure this game was going to mean much, and the coaches were oddly downplaying it. But when the ball tipped off, it was one of the few times where, like, I've seen an Alabama Auburn basketball game where the two fan bases are more into it than the players. It felt like it meant more to the fan bases. This game, I think the players brought the fans in. I really do. I believe that. I believe they brought the fans in with their enthusiasm. There were heroes on both sides. There were unbelievable plays on both sides. There were huge, timely shots by team leaders and practical team legends, like legends in the moment. It had everything. I mean, Grant Nelson, who's been hurt, we've talked about his elevation's not there. He dunks over arguably the best shot blocker in the country and just posterized him. That Mark Sears, who had one of his worst games, especially considering the tear he's been on, hits the game winner driving to his left against Denver Jones, who had clamped him down in the first half, at the end of the first half. Janai Broome, who had really had sort of a flat shot, even though he'd scored a bunch, it had all been around the rim, and he couldn't get any of his deep stuff to go. He hits two big three-pointers late in that game. That one of them that tied it up, that you feel like, oh, God, here we go into a second overtime. Todd Pettiford, a true freshman, going out there and just being totally clutch.
That is a good basketball player right there.
And then LeBaron Philon picking his pocket, by the way, and going in for a huge layup that gave us the lead in overtime again. I mean, it was moment after moment after moment after moment. Every Dick Vitale, and I'll give this to the announcers. I think they captured it pretty well. Like Vitale was actually sort of like, hey, why don't I get a jet to Chapel Hill? I'm like, why would you want to leave where you are right now? This is the best game. This is the best rivalry in college basketball. I mean, I understand your blue-bloodedness is saying, hey, I want to go there. But I'm telling you, this is the best rivalry in college basketball. And they did a good job of saying, y'all, this is one of the best games we've ever seen. And it really doesn't mean much. It doesn't mean Auburn's falling apart, and it doesn't mean Alabama's fixed all its woes. But I do think this. I think the win, here's what I think it can do, and I'm going to run the gamut. I think it can give Alabama a boost it needed. I talked to somebody associated with the program before the game, and they were like, they were pessimistic. And because they felt like we were out of gas, it's going to be tough. But afterwards, the tone was different. Like this may kick us off. This might. Now, you won't know till you get into it, but the mood now has changed around Alabama. And the mood around Auburn has changed in the sense that this team looked unbeatable for a while. They really did. Even, they lost at Duke, yeah, and they lost at home to Florida, yeah, but you could forgive those as just anomalies. And now you're like, okay, they've lost 2 in a row, and one of them was at home. And we know this Alabama team was out of gas and kind of beat up, and they sucked it up and did it. Why can't we? And I think but the other side of it is Auburn may have lost the number 1 overall seed. Some people say they haven't. They might have. And Janai Broome might have lost player of the year, even though he had his best game of the year, because Cooper Flagg's squad takes over that number 1 slot. And Cooper Flagg's getting all this momentum for some reason, even though he is. I'll say it again. Janai Broome should win it. Cooper Flagg's a better player, 100%. So Auburn may get motivation from it. At the same time, Auburn, some weaknesses were exposed. What was that? The Lord of the Rings with the Smog, the dragon, where they have like this little chink in their armor, and that one guy had to shoot an arrow right in that chink. Well, maybe they got a few more chinks than we thought.
They're certainly a good basketball team. I think Alabama and Auburn are both going to make a lot of noise in the NCAA tournament. I'll be shocked if Auburn has an early exit again, after what happened, to them last year. I said last week, I don't know that Alabama's as good as Auburn and Florida. I think they were as good as the other 5 teams that beat Alabama. I think Alabama is as good as those teams and could beat them. I wasn't sure Alabama could beat Auburn or Florida. So, hey, they proved me wrong at the end. I loved seeing it. And I'm back in terms of wind in the sails. I'm back to what I believe. And it's what I believed even prior to last week. Alabama's capable of beating anyone. Alabama is capable of going to this NCAA tournament and winning the whole thing. And it's been very rare in my life of watching Alabama basketball. I've been doing it for a long time, going back to the 80s. It's been rare in my life, I've said with a straight face, going into the NCAA tournament.
That month of madness, it's here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. If you want to look that far into the future, the futures are there for you. I've got an eye on a couple that I'm thinking about. We got to see how the seedings all shake out. FanDuel makes it easy to back your favorites with spreads, totals, game props. And with tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is easy to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. I don't wait around. I just get the money. It's great. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you can turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. How about a little Montana State, Idaho State? Big Sky tournament. Montana State, slight favorites. FanDuel has them laying 1.5. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
Kentucky basketball needed a heroic defensive effort to pick up an upset win.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Kentucky basketball victors in Como, 91-83 was the final score. Cats get it done, and they have a chance right now to get up to the 5 seed in the SEC tournament. I was waiting to kind of see what LSU A&M looked like going into halftime. I also wanted to see how that Auburn-Alabama game ended if you're coming off after just watching that. An overtime buzzer-beating victory for Mark Sears and company. Could have used Chad Baker-Mazara for the final 10-plus minutes of that game, but he got himself ejected. Right now, as it stands, 17 minutes left in the second half. LSU up by 2 over Texas A&M. If the Tigers get the win over the Aggies and Ole Miss loses to Florida later tonight, Kentucky will be the 5 seed in the SEC tournament next week. If Florida loses to Ole Miss, or if I believe Texas A&M wins against LSU, Kentucky will end up being the 7 or 6 seed, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it's the 6. But man, Kentucky did their part. I mean, everything has kind of fallen Kentucky's way here over the past several days, with on Wednesday some big-time results going in Kentucky's favor, making sure that they would not slide to the 10, then the 9, and then making sure that they got the double bye. And these were all results that happened outside of them. Mississippi State losing to Texas. You see Ole Miss beating Tennessee in Oxford earlier this week. Just some big-time performances here across the board that have kind of helped Kentucky get into this position. And they came into this game, Missouri was a 6-point favorite at tip-off, and Kentucky wins it by 8 What a game from Kentucky. And I want to start here with the way that this game kind of started. Super sluggish on both ends of the floor. Defensively, both teams kind of duking it out. Kentucky had a couple of different opportunities, some good looks, missed them, had some point-blank shots, just they were not able to go down. I mean, Otega Owe, I wanted him to be a really efficient player in this game, and he finished with 22 points. And or a couple of rebounds and an assist and 3 steals, but was 6 of 17 from the floor. You take out the 3-point shots, he was 4 of 14, just could not get shots to fall. But man, Kentucky found some rhythm and they started to cook there towards the middle of the first half. They went on a little bit of a run. I believe they had a kill shot that made Missouri call a timeout, and then they won. We talked about it with the Auburn game, right? They won the middle 8. They controlled the final 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. And I believe that's a big reason why they were able to pick up a win today, is that they were able to build a lead there in the middle of the game, kind of steal momentum going into and coming out of the halftime break. What a performance from Mark Pope to be able to continue throughout the course of the game, to get energy from his entire roster, to get good defense, to get sound switches, to get aggressive play off of ball screens, off of pick and roll. The only thing Kentucky could not slow down, and frankly, not really many teams have been able to slow this down this season, is Mark Mitchell. He was able to kind of get his at various points in this game, especially in the second half. You want to take a look at his stats here real quick. 22 points on 6 of 12 inside, 2 of 2 from beyond the arc, was 4 of 7 from the charity stripe. We'll get to free throws in a second. Had 3 assists, 5 rebounds, no turnovers. A great performance from him for the Tigers. But here for Kentucky, man, the defense was everything, I think, in this game. And you talk about, Seth Pryor mentions it in the chat here just now. You talk about Kentucky getting production from their front court defensively. Shout out Andrew Carr. Shout out Amari Williams. Both guys, I think, stepped up in a major way this game. Both of them were kind of all over the place. They were asked to do a ton on both ends of the floor. Andrew Carr here in this game ended up finishing with 34 minutes. I'll pull up his plus-minus stats here real quick. For some reason, Missouri's stats broadcast is being really weird. He was even. He was 0 there on the plus minus, but Amari was plus 13. Both players finished in double figures. Carr finished with a double-double, his third of the season, with 3 assists and a couple of blocks and a steal. Big-time stuff from Andrew Carr defensively down the stretch, and Wayne Evans mentions it in the chat here after this 91-83 victory. 3-1 in our last 4. I was close to my 4-0 prediction. Of course, with the way that Auburn has been playing as of late, you are not surprised that Kentucky fell to them. If we get them again, I think it would be very interesting. It's clear Auburn has lost some major energy after beating Kentucky. I think they wanted to clinch that SEC title. Pearl got them up for that game. Kentucky was in a weird spot, could not get past a lot of different things in that game defensively. Miles Kelly had just an insane hot shooting night, or day, I should say. It wasn't played in the evening. But now Auburn's kind of fallen off, I think, mentally. They have struggled against Texas A&M, lost that game. Just lost here against Alabama in a game that they were favored by 8. A buzzer-beating floater from Mark Sears to seal that game. So I think Kentucky right now, despite the loss to Auburn, is still in a very good spot, I think, emotionally, and then physically. I think health-wise, they're looking great, all things considered, with Jackson Creesa out for the season, both of them officially out for the season. You look across this roster, Carr coming out of the postgame saying that he feels great. Lamont Butler feels great. Mark Pope has praised these kids for kind of rallying despite some of the health concerns. And something that Mark Pope praised today, and I think that we need to give these guys their flowers, is that the young guys played super well. Like really, really well coming off the bench. Travis Perry, I know I've given this kid a very hard time, like a really hard time, criticizing his play on the floor, saying that he's just not ready at this point to be an SEC contributor, at least in a really tight spot. But man, he finished with a big 3 or late in that first half. He had 3 points, 1 assist. He did have a couple of bad turnovers, but plus 10 there. While he was on the floor, had a big steal also where he got the ball back, fed it to Williams, who slammed it after Missouri was trying to get out in transition. I liked what I saw from him, and I liked what I saw from Travis Perry and from Trent Noah and Colin Chandler. Colin Chandler has continued to impress. Shot 2 of 4 from 3 in this game. Box score says he has had 2 turnovers, Seth, not 3. Although if he had a third, I would not be shocked. But Colin Chandler, 8 points, 3 of 5 from the floor, 2 of 4 from downtown. Big shot as the first half came to an end. He has been a legitimate scorer, replacing Jackson Robinson's production. He's coming alive, man. He looks more comfortable. He's shooting the ball at an extremely high clip. He's picking up steals. He got a block in this game. You can tell Kentucky is kind of short on athleticism in a variety of different spots on their roster, but Colin Chandler, with his athleticism and his go, he is an explosive player that I think Kentucky can start to lean on a little bit more, or at least kind of nudge him in that direction as we are officially into postseason play. Trent Noah, 1 of 2 from 3. He was +7 in this one, had a couple of rebounds. One of them, I think, was just a big defensive board. He also had an assist in 10 minutes of play. Man, the production on short notice from Colin Chandler, Trent Noah, and Travis Perry, I think, was very impressive in this contest.